What a treat. Today we have Kayla Alpert on the show. Kayla is a writer and executive producer. She's written for shows such as All That, Ally McBeal, Emily in Paris, and currently Netflix's Wednesday. She has also written one of my favorite book-to-film adaptations, Confessions of a Shopaholic. Kayla is funny, authentic, and strong. Her willingness and support for other women in the industry is a breath of fresh air. This episode reminds me of the Friends episode, the one with the girl from Poughkeepsie. Monica hires and fires Joey at the restaurant she works at, so the staff will finally respect her at her job. Kayla shared with me how in the beginning of her career, just like Monica, she didn't get the respect she deserved. We talk about knowing your worth and the will to never give up. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kayla Alpert. I love your glasses, by the way.
Thank you. I just got them.
They're so cute.
They're Warby Parker, my first pair.
What's so funny is I got a pair of glasses like that, and because Jennifer Aniston had them, and then I was like, I look more like Mr. Feeney than Jennifer Aniston in these.
I feel a little like Jeffrey Dahmer-esque. I think that's where I sort of went on the spectrum. A little less Aniston, a little more Dahmer.
That's really funny. Well, I'm happy to see you again.
Yes, we miss you on the karaoke picket line.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun. Singing, what did we sing? Hold On by Wilson Phillips.
Yes, that was so good.
It's so funny that that's like we just met then, and then it was like a fun karaoke night out, and it was so amazing.
I mean, I think that was always our goal when we started Picket Line Karaoke. I mean, I didn't start it, I joined in, is that we were like bringing people together. Mm-hmm. Creating a sense of solidarity, sometimes with other writers and also with people in other, unions. So
yeah, it was so
funny.
We
needed some of those SAG voices because writers are not known for our vocals.
It was funny because I work at a salon, and a lot of our clients are all people in the industry. And so one of my clients who we talk a little bit, but then after I saw them at the Disney picket, they were like, they were picketing and they saw me singing, and I was like, this is so embarrassing and
That's
awkward.
Hilarious.
I was like, you don't think that you're going to run into your clients ever. And then like after that though, we talk like all the time. It was like a great icebreaker.
It is. I mean, I think having a lack of dignity, which I have, helps. Because I was not only singing in front of, people I work with, the people I worked for, people I've dated, people who, have fired me, people who've hired me, the whole thing.
Okay, can I say I'm so happy you said that, because there are times where I'm like, I don't want to go to this picket because I'm going to see like 2 people who ghosted me, and I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm married and all that stuff, but the picket line became like a "This Is Your Life" episode, like people from the 90s, people from the 2000s. Mm-hmm. Like I saw so many people I'd been on staff with, 25 years ago, people I'd been on a blind date with. It was crazy.
That's so amazing.
Kind of exhausting. It was really fun because I think after 2 years of COVID, mm-hmm. I missed out on so much socializing. It was kind of fun. And then it became exhausting. I got to be honest. It was like going to a cocktail party all the time.
Yeah. I think after that day that I saw you, I came home and slept for like 2 hours.
Exhausting.
How do you feel now that you guys made a deal?
I feel good.
Let's go to the very beginning of you are a writer, and you have written for Ally McBeal. Yeah. You wrote for All That, which is amazing.
Oh yeah, that was my first job. Yeah.
Really? Oh my gosh. Nothing was more exciting than watching All That when I was a kid.
It's so funny because I wrote on the first season of that show, and I at the time I was in my early 20s, just to date myself, and I didn't have kids. I didn't have friends who had kids. You know what I mean? I was the wrong age to know 8-year-olds or 7-year-olds. And so for me, there was like no cultural impact I felt on that show. And it's not till now that I realize how many kids watch that show.
Oh yeah. So
how many young adults now are like, oh my God, I grew up on that show.
Absolutely. And
at the time I always felt like it was very D-list because it was kind of it was like a kid's show and I wanted to be a grown-up writer.
But it was so funny. And also, It was the time of like TLC and Britney Spears and NSYNC. Like it was just like mania, and like it was, it was SNL for children, and it was amazing.
That's right. I mean, that was our whole goal. And look, some of those people, like, look at Keenan,
I know.
he's a huge SNL staple. He's like an icon of SNL now.
Mm-hmm.
And Good Burger was a big movie. I mean, I have kids and they're past that age now, but when they were younger, they watched it. I was like, I can't believe there are children watching this thing.
Right. How did you get into this industry?
So I grew up back east. I grew up in New York, and
Mhm.
after college, there was sort of, at that time, there was like sort of a manifest destiny to come out west. I had started out as wanting to be a comedy writer. And there were a lot of people grew up with and went to college with back east who came out to LA to work in television. It was sort of a burgeoning industry, sort of the way tech would have been now. That was hot. There was no internet, remember, back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone who had sort of a partial business but mostly creative sort of sense of adventure wanted to go into entertainment. So I moved out to LA right after college. I moved in I had a roommate from college that we moved in together, and just started, I started off as an assistant at a management company. I actually started out in publicity, answering fan mail for American Gladiator, which was a show
Oh my gosh,
back
yes.
then. And then also working on the premiere of Much Ado About Nothing, the Kenneth Branagh movie, for the Samuel Goldwyn Company. And then I just sort of worked as an assistant. And then I got my first job on all that. I just was writing and writing and writing. And then I worked on Sweet Valley High for a couple of years. And then from there, kind of launched into sort of more mainstream television.
Yes.
But there was that at that time, there were a ton of young people coming out to this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Silicon Valley did not exist as it does now. So there was a big draw to come out here.
Mm-hmm. What would you say when you were like, because you want to be you wanted to be, you are a comedy writer. What would you say is the show that you were watching that made you like, what was your aha moment? Like when you were watching something and you were like, I want to do that.
That's such a good question. I think like a lot of kids, we like latchkey kids of Generation X, we all grew up sort of like our babysitter was the television.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I can't say, oh my God, the Brady Bunch inspired me. I was actually a big like bookworm. So the truth is that I just read a ton. I was like, my nose was in a book, and I love stories. So I would say that like stories were really exciting to me. But the fresh, interesting, fun way to tell stories by the time I was sort of graduating college, like I wasn't an exciting prospect to become a novelist, right? But a fun way to sort of collaborate with other people and tell funny stories was television. I don't know if there was a specific show at that time that I was like, I have to write that show. It wasn't like, oh, I saw The Fresh Prince and I was like, I can't wait to write that.
Yeah.
I think it was more just a sense of like, loving stories and loving the process. I think The Simpsons had just come out and it was so funny. I had always grown up loving like Mary Tyler Moore and Taxi and shows like that were like a little bit above my age at the time. But like Brittany, you think about Friends didn't start till I was out here. I remember the first season of Friends, I tried to get a job on the show. And then my roommate at the time, I had a roommate for like 6 or 7 years, we were friends with all the writers on Friends who I see on the picket line, etc. And like, they would tell our stories on the show.
I love that.
And same with Sex and the City. Like my roommate famously is the subject of a breakup where she got broken up with on a Post-it note. And then our friends on Sex and the City made that the burger story.
I have goosebumps on my arm.
Yeah. But like, remember, we were part of that fabric. So another friend of mine was filming a very low budget film, and he gave me a call and he said, listen, I know this is crazy, but I'm filming this very low budget film. I'm funding, with found money here and there. Can we use your apartment for location for one of the scenes? And we're also doing a big party scene. Can you, like, we're having a real party. Can you invite people and make it a real party? So I was like, sure, come in. Whole film crew came in, like they made our apartment look like a bachelor pad. We then went to a party the following week and like had a real party that was being filmed, and that was Swingers.
Wow.
Right. So like this, like, we were sort of building that sort of momentum of all those stories. So it's like I didn't come out here like on the heels of Friends. I came out here just as that stuff was starting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
That's incredible. And it also just feels like I hope that that is what my friends and I can say about our careers one day too. It's like, yeah, we were part of the fabric that made this. And I could imagine, like, do you feel that the industry has just changed so much since then that it's kind of lost its magic? Because sometimes it feels that way a little bit.
Well, it does feel that way. I mean, I still think there are shows and movies and experiences,
Mhm.
including Taylor Swift concert, Eras concert,
Mm,
that feel like a big collective fun experience. And
right.
like, I think you can't get that from staring at a YouTube video on your phone.
Yeah.
But I do feel like the the internet and social media and TikTok and Instagram and stuff, like, they've really diluted the sort of communal experience of going to the movies, and kind of everybody, the binge model has really ruined the, like, what's going to happen next week on Friends, or
Right.
we don't have those like shows anymore that we're like into for 8 years, or 10 seasons
Yeah.
or 7 seasons. It's hard. That said, I think there are still those experiences, and I think people love, I mean, I think part of, look, there's a lot of reasons that Taylor Swift's Eras tour was so successful, and she's incredible.
Mhm.
I think part of that we can't discount isn't just her songwriting or it's the vibe of being part of something bigger
Yeah.
and something positive and something fun and something that speaks, at least for the people who love her music,
Yeah.
speaks to their own personal experience with, heartbreak or high school romance or college romance, or just whatever those experiences that she's singing about,
Mhm.
and the friendship bracelets and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there are still those experiences. I just think they're not as localized into, Friends television show, or Never Been Kissed movie, or Julia
Mhm.
Roberts Runaway Bride, or whatever those movies are that speak to people,
Yeah, and I feel
or
like
Pretty Woman, or whatever.
yeah, and I think a lot of things, from that era, it was about the process, where now it's all about the outcome. And it's a lot of like, what numbers can we get? And
Yeah,
it's not so much about just for the love of doing it. It seems more like, I need attention. I need to go viral. I need
yeah,
this. And
yeah,
it does, it takes away. And I think we all crave this like nostalgia of all old shows, and we rewatch all these old shows because it didn't feel like that. It was just kind of like lightning in a bottle that made it incredible, and has this like longevity that a lot of shows now I think are still trying to
yeah. No, I
find.
think you're absolutely onto something. I think, first of all, these sort of short orders make it
Mhm.
harder to kind of have a long-term relationship with the characters.
Yeah.
Right. Another thing that I think people don't talk about enough, that I think, I work on Wednesday now on Netflix. And one of the things that I believe made it popular among, there's a lot of elements of that show, is that we made Wednesday an analog character in an analog world almost. So she doesn't have a cell phone.
Mhm.
And I think part of what is really comforting to a lot of younger, like Gen Z generation watchers, is that she's not into her face is not in a screen all the time,
Yes.
and she's not texting, and she's not,
Mhm.
sending photos over the internet or whatever
Right.
that is. There is something that psychologically is very comforting about the analog show. So one of the things that whenever I rewatch Friends, that sort of is funny to me, it wouldn't be as striking, I think, if I hadn't lived through it, is how many stories are based around people answering their landlines, not answering their landlines, having mess ups on their answering machines, which we all used to do, or trying to get in touch with someone you can't get in touch with, and also constantly saying to people, hey, do you want to go see a movie tonight?
Yeah.
All of these experiences don't really
Exist. Yeah.
exist anymore, because we're all just pinging each other and texting each other constantly. And there's something comforting about being in an analog world where all communication has to be face to face.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why part of why those kinds of shows, particularly Friends, feel so pure.
Yeah. 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 I say it's like this meme. It's like if friends were in present day and it was like Ross texting Rachel, "Are we on a break?" And she says no. And he says, "Okay, see you later." And like
Yeah,
that would be the whole show. Like
that's the whole show.
because and also like the comedy aspect of all those shows are the miscommunications.
Correct.
So
And also
it's
like walking in on people or not being
yeah.
able to find people or
Yeah.
running into people you didn't expect to see. And there's like an element of surprise. And there's an element of surprise when you're not in constant communication with the whole world as we are now.
Exactly. Exactly. So you are executive producer and writer of
Yes.
Rise
So
Up
executive
Wednesday?
producer can mean a whole lot of different things.
Okay.
So it's basically a title that I have as a writer. So I'm one of the top writers on the show. Yeah.
And so how hard was that to figure out ways, you know, there is as an audience, you watch it and you go, "Oh, she could have just picked up her phone." So how did you calculate those ways for the audience to not even think that, you know?
Well, so the creators of the show, Al Goff and Miles Miller, when they came up with the idea for the show, it wasn't my idea, it was their idea. They're the
Mhm.
creators. And when they came up with the idea for the show, they made a very, I think, smart choice, and a very deliberate choice that Wednesday would not be into modern technology. She
Mhm.
writes her mystery novel on a manual typewriter. She's like a little steampunk, but she does not have a cell phone or an iPhone or a smartphone or any of that stuff. And she does not do the internet. And they made that a very deliberate choice because she is sort of a throwback kind of character
Right.
who sort of defies teenage convention,
Mhm.
right? And so then we, as a group, really had to work and say, and it made it more fun because that's, the fun of her discovering things is that she discovers them in a very organic way and in a very character driven way, as opposed to just conveniently Googling something or looking up somebody's
Right.
location. So they made that decision. And she openly remarks many times during the first season that she is not into modern technology. I think
Yeah.
maybe once or twice she uses it off of her roommate Enid, but
Yeah,
like for
yeah,
the most
yeah. The
part,
episode
we just kind of,
I just watched the
yeah,
episode where she's like trying to figure out how to use her computer. And I was like, that
yeah,
is so funny.
yeah. But the fact that that choice was made it very fun for us to really have to kind of have her be a bit more throwback and a little bit more active in her own mystery solving and in her own,
Hmm.
personal life too.
Hmm.
Thing delivering notes behind her back and stuff. Like she doesn't just have the convenience of texting, and she wouldn't be a character that would want in. I mean, I think at the very end of the season, the cliffhanger is she finally gets a cell phone and someone is stalking her.
Oh, I haven't gotten
And
there
so
yet.
if you've
I
gotten
got
there
it.
yet,
I'm
sorry, no
watching it.
spoilers. I'm not going to tell
I
you who
know.
it is,
I'm
but
watching it because let me just tell you, I'm the biggest baby in the world. If I watch Boy Meets World and watch their Halloween episode, I'm having nightmares.
yeah,
Like,
no, watch it in the light of day and you'll be okay.
oh, I've been watching it
Many
in the morning.
8-year-olds have made it past, made
Yeah,
it through.
so I am still watching it, but so yes, I am excited to see where it goes. I was very scared the first episode, I'm not gonna lie. And I just watched the second episode and I'm sitting there like I'm so hooked. And this is not typically like a show I would be hooked on, but because it has the comedy in it also. I'm like, okay, I can watch it. I have to watch something that has a laugh that could like break up the tension.
Yeah. Agreed.
So
Agreed.
when you were brought on to Wednesday and writing for Wednesday, did you feel like an immense amount of pressure to because people when it comes to reboots are like, why are they doing this again? Or how many times do we have to see
Yeah.
XYZ? And Wednesday Addams is a beloved character to so
Mhm.
many people. So did you feel this pressure to like, oh my gosh, I have to do this amazing. It has to be perfect. Or were you just like, you know what, this is our version of it and so be it?
Yeah, you know what? Look, so Al and Miles and I had all worked on the sort of Addams Family animated movie and stuff. And I grew up on Wednesday. I grew up with the TV show, and then later I grew up with the movies, and my kids had loved the movies, the Addams Family Values, and all that
So
stuff.
good.
So we felt like we feel an enormous amount of respect and loyalty to what Charles Addams created and to what that world is and to the fans of the character. But we also knew we had to like break out of that because it's not the same Wednesday. She's an
Hmm.
older Wednesday. She's a teenage Wednesday. She's not a 9-year-old.
Right.
So we try always to make it as honest and to that character without it feeling like we're too scared of maybe making her, taking some chances on her. So I mean, she's not going to suddenly be, wearing a, pink outfit and going to see the Barbie movie. We really do try to keep it true to her character, but we also, as you said, we also feel like, we have to kind of let her grow. And, we have a huge amount of responsibility to make sure that she grows in a way that feels honest to the original character, but that also maybe just pushes some boundaries. And some people might not like it, but I think some people, obviously quite a few people, really enjoyed seeing her stretch her, spread her wings, as it were.
Right. This question kind of just came to me, maybe it's stupid, but how do you avoid falling into completely towing the line of like honoring the character and not completely copying what has already been done?
Well, I mean, we're in a fortunate position that, again, she's not the same character. I mean, if you wrote Brittany as a 9-year-old and Brittany as a 15-year-old, they would be
I don't know. They might be the
have
same.
some similarities, but they would also be a different person. I mean, Wednesday's growing and she has new feelings and has new feelings and new skills. And, I think we were lucky in that, we also gave her a sense of purpose that's like a little bit different than we've ever seen her in the movies. And she's like solving these crimes and she's not in the sort of bosom of her family, right? She's at this new school with new kids and a new world. So in some ways it just sort of came naturally that, we're going to have her in different situations.
Yeah.
You'll see, you haven't watched it all, but you'll see like there's all kinds of new challenges that she has. And
well, yeah. And I went
and a new
into
side
it.
to her and a new actress, by the way. Jenna Ortega is amazing.
She's
and like
incredible.
Brings herself. What was great is, look, I wouldn't be nervous about stepping into Christina Ricci's shoes. And, she was such a beloved version of Wednesday. And I think Jenna just made it her own and just really did an incredible job making us fall in love again with a different, older version of Wednesday.
Yeah, it was funny. I was watching it and I was like, she is so short. Like she looks so tiny. And I Googled how tall she was and I was like, oh, she's my height. Like this is what I look like to people.
She's just petite. She's petite, but you know what? She's petite but mighty.
She has a very monotone voice and I was watching this scene and like her face just has to be like this the whole time. And she still makes it so interesting to watch. And I could imagine as a writer that makes your job really easy.
Yeah. So we wrote it all not knowing that it was going to be Jenna. We wrote it not knowing it was going to be Tim Burton. So, I mean, that was always the goal, is Tim Burton. But
now you've written for sitcom, obviously, with Ally McBeal. And
that was actually a 1 hour. That wasn't a sitcom.
Oh, yes, gosh.
1 hour. It was a 1 hour dramedy. But I have written on sitcoms, most of which have been canceled. So you wouldn't know them. But yes, I've written on all different kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And I know like a lot of people relate writing comedy as it's musical. Like, there has to be a flow to it. And would you say that's the same thing for writing a dramedy or a drama, or completely different?
Well, I think it's a very different thing. I think you just have different, the story works different, the character, the mood, the tone. No, I think it's quite different. And I think when you inject levity into drama, it's different than having like a sitcom with hard jokes. I mean, I would say a sitcom is closer to like a farcical play. You really have those like set up, punch, and the clap and the laughs, like in a Friends type episode. Like you're really playing to an audience, and they were playing literally to an audience, to a live audience. And with drama, it's very different. It's a much more, it's much more filmic that way.
Yeah.
And you write it differently. The jokes don't land the way that they land. You're not writing performatively to a joke. Sometimes it also, if it's too jokey, things feel a little bit overwritten in a drama in a way that like they don't feel as overwritten when they're being performed on a sitcom.
Yeah. Yeah. When you watch TV now, is it hard for you to watch TV? Are you
Sometimes,
dissecting it?
Because I know how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like, I can sort of guess endings, or I'm like watching it and seeing like, oh, they made that choice because of this. And I bet this is why they made that choice. And I was in a group of friends of mine from high school were in a sort of pool of what would happen at the end of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was putting in their guesses. And again, like I just watched it as a fan, and
Yeah.
I put in my guesses and I won the pool because I guessed about 4 things that happened. I had an unfair advantage because I'm like, nope, I can see this is why they would do this and this is why they do that, and probably the dragons will melt the throne. And people were like, oh my God, like, how did you guess? And I'm like, because I know how this stuff is made. It doesn't mean it was predictable. It was just, I can unravel these things and then put them back together. I mean, any experienced TV writer would be able to do that.
Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting because like I'm watching Heart of Dixie for the second. I watched it. I don't know if you ever
Oh
watched
my
that
God,
show.
that's hilarious.
I am obsessed with. I like these like fictional worlds that are still based in reality. It's like
Yeah.
it's Bluebell, Alabama, like not a
Yeah.
real town, but it's
Yeah.
still Alabama in present day, or like Stars Hollow of Gilmore Girls. Like it's in Connecticut, but it's not a real part of Connecticut.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the perfect amount of escaping. But I watched all of Heart of Dixie like all the way through, and then I was so sad for like 2 days because I was like I felt like I just like lost all my friends.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I started it again. But now this time I'm watching it and I'm literally watching it just solely as an actor, like, okay, like watching their coverage and like watching the other actor during the other person's coverage. And like I can't stop watching how the sausage is made. And this time I'm not as invested in the storylines as much as like I'm watching their choices. So I think the only show I don't do that with is Friends.
You mean you just watch it to watch it?
I just watch it to watch it. Because I
How many
completely,
times have you watched Friends all the way through?
oh my God.
You and
That's,
Taylor Swift.
I mean, I can't even think. I have been watching it every night for at least the last 10 years.
It's really funny because in your generation, I have a couple other friends who it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like their comfort food. Like they
Yeah.
go to bed, they put on like, it's not that they're not watching other things. It's
Yeah.
like the last thing it's like a comfort read. Like
Yeah.
they just put it on and it's like, go to sleep to Friends.
Yeah. And
And I
I
don't mean
don't.
because it puts them to sleep. It's just like a comfort thing.
No, it helps my anxiety so much. Like I don't sleep well because when I was watching Heart of Dixie the first time around, I'd fall asleep because I was so invested, and then I'd fall asleep watching it. And I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, like anxious. And then I would turn Friends back on and go right back to bed.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I just needed them
It's so
there.
funny. I'm not sure anyone, including the people who made Friends, would have guessed that it would hold up so well generationally. And by the way, there are many aspects of it that probably would never, that don't hold up, and that you admit don't hold up, and the sort of lack of diversity, and like
Mm-hmm.
some of the, I would say, like some slightly homophobic jokes, and there's some stuff
Yeah.
there that like kind of doesn't sit well anymore. And
Yeah.
yet, okay, so despite all that, it does feel like this hugely comforting thing to Gen Z. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. I'm not sure that anyone would have foreseen that.
Yeah, and that's it goes back to what we were talking about. Like they were just loving the process and they were going with it. And I think now we live in a time where everybody's trying to create the next Friends. Like, oh, let's make it
Right.
just like Friends. And it's like you just gotta let it flow and like be like honor the work and the art of it all, and
Yeah.
then that'll happen.
I just think it's also by design, it was always a show literally about like a lovely set of friendships.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's something very comforting about that. And I think you're right. Like in the days of streaming and having to have, 8 episodes that pop, a slow burning set of friendships is not something that's going to capture people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's sort of like the sort of sweetness and intimacy and small stories of Friends. Like nobody is developing that anymore.
Right. And not every
Like
episode.
everything has to be big and crazy and murders, and even in
Mhm.
comedy it has to be like in your face or sexy or wacky or edgy. And I think there's just something, Friends is a very warm show, and it makes you feel like you're the seventh, right? There's 6 of them, like you're the seventh friend, right? Like
Yeah.
you feel like this is your friend group.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that is very, and people don't make shows like that anymore. And they certainly don't have, if it were 16 episodes, I don't think people would be rewatching it 100 times.
Right.
There
And
are hundreds of
there's
episodes.
people don't give shows a chance anymore to find I mean, you look at Cheers and, these
Yeah,
older
yeah.
sitcoms, they didn't blast off in the very beginning. They all had, space to breathe and people
Yeah.
found it and then they became these huge shows. And like,
Although Friends
yeah.
it blasted off from the beginning. Like I remember when it premiered because I had friends who were working on it over the summer and they were like, we don't know if it'll be a hit,
Mhm.
literally. And then, I mean, Lisa Kudrow was like one of my Groundlings teachers.
Oh my gosh, you have to tell me a story about this.
But no, I like she was like a substitute. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
know her well. I'm just saying, like, and I had met Matthew Perry when I had met Matthew Perry in the All That offices. So
What?
he was best friends with the showrunner of All That. And he came in, he had just shot the pilot and the show wasn't on yet. And he was like, yeah, I'm single if you know anyone to set me up with. And I was like, you know what? Your show, I bet, will like come out and then you'll be a big hit and then you'll like have no problem finding girlfriends. But like nobody saw that it was going to be as big a hit. And
Right.
it became mega hit right away.
I'm like, you don't look old enough. And I don't mean to sound
Well, I
offensive, but I'm like,
appreciate that.
you don't
For
look
those of
old
you
enough to
listening to
have
this
been in.
podcast, I'm very flattered.
I'm like, I don't understand how you were like, but what? Okay. But
I
also,
know.
I don't know if you've gotten told this before. The whole time I've been looking at you, I'm like, is that Elizabeth Banks? Like, you look
Yes,
just like
I
her.
have gotten that. I've gotten that, and I'm friends with Elizabeth a little bit. And I once, when she had her kids, she has kids a little bit younger than mine. She like called me and like needed help finding a nanny. So I sent her my nanny's friends, like whatever. I sent her a
Hmm.
nanny, and the nanny got very confused and was like, "Are you guys sisters?" So I have
Yeah.
gotten the Liz Banks thing before, which is
Yeah.
a huge compliment for me. And Liz, apologies if you,
No, I've like
but
literally
I have totally gotten Liz Banks.
yeah,
She's
there's
she's
been times
terrific.
I'm like sitting here and I'm looking and I'm like, this is trippy. Like,
Yeah,
you look
yeah.
just like her.
She's much skinnier than me, but yes.
No, stop it.
She's
But
also she's a super genius, by the way. She's amazing.
a super genius. I love
Yeah.
that.
She's such a brilliant actress and comedian and such a great director and producer. She's just a triple threat.
Yeah.
I loved her on 30 Rock. That's sort of my friends is 30
Hmm.
Rock. Like that's my comfort fun show.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, I love that show and she's so funny in it.
Yeah. When is like the first time you saw yourself in a character on television where you were like, that's me? That's exactly how I act. That's how I feel. Or like, oh my God, I've been through this.
A little bit Liz Lemon and 30 Rock, but I never had like my own show like she did. Like that was about her time on SNL. But like I think there were definitely a lot of like Liz Lemon moments for me that I find to be like, oh my
Hmm.
God, I've totally been that person or had these quirks or this kind of terrible date. I think Tina Fey's kind of outlook on life is much closer to mine than say other television characters.
Yeah.
I'm not Lisa Kudrow in I'm not Phoebe in Friends,
Hmm.
Rachel and Friends, you know, not definitely not Monica and Friends. I mean, I think all of us growing up with those shows were always like, I'm a little bit Carrie Bradshaw, or I'm a little bit,
Yeah.
Monica, or I'm a little bit this and that. But Liz Lemon definitely for me spoke to me.
Yeah.
I would say the movie Ghost World, which is probably you've never seen it. I like very
Oh.
snarky, satirical things. I don't like soft things. It's a very funny little independent movie with Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson in a very young age.
Wow, I need to watch
Oh
this. I've
yeah,
never
it's really good. I
heard
mean,
of
it's
this.
very snarky. It's not like a romantic comedy, but I would say the Enid character in that, who Thora Birch plays, was like very me. I mean, I was much more. I don't look it, but I'm much more Wednesday Addams than I am Rachel Green.
Yeah. I think I'm a mix. It
Yeah,
depends.
yeah, we're
I
all
am
mixes. Yeah,
yeah, with Wednesday Adams, I definitely am like I'm not the perky girl at all. Like I'm not the bubbly, oh my gosh, let's go.
yeah.
Like I've never been that way except when I'm talking about friends.
Yeah. I mean, there's a joke in Wednesday that I came up with. It's not basically a guy. You'll see it later, Brittany, in the season. I think it's
Hmm.
like episode 6 or 7. I think it's episode 6 or 7, where her boyfriend or her love interest in Wednesday surprises her with a movie night to watch a horror movie, and the credits go up on the horror movie, and it's Legally Blonde, and she's like, "This is basically the most
That
horrifying movie she can
is
imagine," and that is like me, basically.
that is so funny. I
Yeah,
love that. I
but
just literally
that was like a
quoted that
page out of
yesterday.
my life. So like Wednesday is very me. I didn't write all of it, but like that
Yeah.
character is as close to me in terms of my snarky attitude.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, I love that. Now, would you say as a female in this industry that breaking into being a successful writer was, because I feel like there's this whole kind of weird, people are like, women aren't funny. This
Oh
whole,
yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
mean, of course they're mowing the lawn right now.
Oh, I can't hear it. Don't
Okay,
worry.
good. I'm like, hasn't been done in
Yeah.
weeks and they come
Yeah.
today.
No, I can't hear it.
Okay. But I feel like this whole idea that this whole dialogue of like women aren't funny and it's
Oh,
just complete
absolutely.
bullshit. And
Yeah.
how did you overcome those types of obstacles in your career?
Well, it's funny, and people have printed the story about me before, but my very first day on All That, the head of the show said to me, "Women aren't funny. Name one funny woman." And
Uh,
that was like my introduction to Hollywood, my
oh
first day, my first writing job.
my God.
Yeah, that's how it started.
So what was it in you to be like, you're gonna see, like,
Yeah, it's
just you
just
wait.
like, it's like fuel for
Mm-hmm.
proving everybody wrong.
Yeah. And you
And
know
like,
what?
women are really funny. And sometimes we're funny in a different way than men. And sometimes men are funny in a way that doesn't make me laugh. Look, I dare you to show me a Three Stooges episode that I will ever crack a smile at. It would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's lots of stuff that men think are hilarious and I just don't. It's
Right.
just you have maybe a different sensibility, but it is definitely a challenge. I think there was definitely a lot of there's a huge sense that like women aren't as funny as men, and that's just not true. I mean, I
Mhm.
think now people would be more hesitant to say that, but I think starting out in the 90s, that was absolutely the sort of prevailing attitude. And there's so many brilliant women. I mean, some of my absolute favorite people that came out of, SNL were women. I mean,
Yeah.
Molly Shannon, Anna Gasteyer, Maya Rudolph, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler. I mean, and now there are so many funny women. Kristen Wiig, my God, like
Mhm.
some of my absolute favorite people.
Yeah, but I mean, even Carol Burnett was like,
Yeah,
how do you not think women are funny? Like,
I know.
what are you talking about?
But look, also men control the levers of power. So
Yeah.
you could have a lot of funny women. Carol Burnett got her own show, but Mary Tyler Moore is hilarious. Like, but there were probably a lot of women who didn't get to have their own show that
Yeah.
were just as funny, and men did.
Yeah. When would you say was the first time you felt like respected as a woman in the industry?
I'm waiting. No, I'm just kidding. Um,
Oh no.
look, it's
Oh,
always look. I'm having a good experience now on Wednesday, but
yeah.
it's always an ebb and flow. Like
Right.
it's never 100% positive experience, or
Right.
it's always going to be give with one hand, take away with the other. Like
Mhm.
every experience has like these experiences in the business are so collaborative that there's always going to be some people who respect you and some people who don't on the same project.
Mhm.
So when did I think people started respecting me? I don't know. I've been through it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's ever a moment. There are times when I feel very respected and then suddenly it's all taken away.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking about what, the first thing that somebody said to you at all that, it's like I was just talking about I was on Wizards of Waverly Place, and I'll never forget, like, it was my first job ever being on a set with hair and makeup. Like, oh my God, I'm on Disney Channel. It's the most exciting thing in the entire world. And David Henry was on my opposite. And he was like, your reactions are great. Like, the directors are loving this. And that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, I have made it. This is amazing. I can
Yeah.
do this. Because when you're on your first job, you don't know, like, that person, if you would have listened to them and said, oh, maybe he's right, your whole life would have been different. And there are people who don't have the wherewithal or the strength to go, I'm not going to listen to this person. What they're saying has nothing to do with me. I know my worth. And like what somebody higher up says to you in the beginning of your career could really make or break you. So I think it's so important of just realizing that what you say to other people based on your experience can really change their trajectory.
That's right. And I think that yes, and also knowing your own worth.
Mm-hmm.
that if I know I'm funny, it doesn't mean I'm always right. It doesn't mean every joke I pitch is the best version of a joke. It doesn't mean every story idea I have is the best version. But if I know fundamentally that I am good at what I do and I have worth and what I have to say is meaningful and my contribution is real, then that's okay. I don't need to have everybody telling me whether I'm worth it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a fine balance between having self-respect and also being open to improving and open to changing. I just feel
Right.
like this is a tough business to hang your whole ego on what other people say. But
Right.
I do think you're right, like paying it forward and realizing that, now that I'm in a more of a position, a position more of authority or power, I have to remember, and I do, is to make sure that the people under me feel heard and respected, and that I
Mm-hmm.
remember to say, it's a lot easier to remember to tell somebody when something doesn't work than to say good job. And I
Right.
think it's important, just as important, if not more important, to remember to tell people they're doing a great job, or something they did, a reaction they did was great, or a joke they pitched was funny, or a story idea they had was great, even if you're not using it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So I want to talk to you. There are a couple more questions before we
Okay.
have to go. You wrote the screenplay for Confessions of a Shopaholic, correct? That,
Mm-hmm.
that is one of my favorite rom-coms ever. I had no idea. When I was looking up your IMDb, I was like, what? Like, I love that movie. It is the best when you're like, it's a rainy day, or you
Yeah.
feel a
Yeah.
little hungover and you're like, I'm going to watch Confessions of a Shopaholic. So I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
when you're writing a movie based off a book, because people, again, go back to Wednesday, there's a lot of pressure on making it so you're honoring the book
Yeah.
and not just copying and pasting exactly what happened, but then the fans are like, well, why'd you leave this out?
Right.
So how do you attack and start, go, okay, this is what I'm going to make this movie about?
That's a good question. I think adaptations can be tricky because you
Hmm.
do have a template, or at least you have some things that are fan favorites. I think some books lend themselves more to adaptation than others. Like, I think if you're doing Harry Potter, or, one of those kinds of books, I think there are things that you really like, you do not change.
Hmm.
Um, I think there are other books where it's like there are essential premises that have to stay, but not every single scene is a dramatic enough scene to make it into a movie. So every single adaptation is different. And I think you try to find what the essence of the thing that makes people love the book, and how do you translate that into dramatic moments? Because some stuff is internal, or some stuff, it doesn't have the conflict that drives a novel is not the same kind of conflict that drives a dramatic
Right.
screenplay. And
Right.
I say dramatic, I don't mean literally like
Yeah.
tonally dramatic. I just mean, in terms of the structure. So, you try to save the things that really work, and you try to build on the things that, maybe it's in the spirit of what the book would have wanted.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's different for every adaptation. I mean, I've adapted books where I've just gone totally off the book
Hmm.
because it's too internal to play dramatically.
Right.
And other times where you're more true to the source material.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah. Is there a,
and then there's always like set pieces in the book that people love, and you're like, well, I have to keep that, or I have to keep
yeah.
this.
Yeah. Like the iconic green scarf.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a book that you've read recently where you're like, "Ooh, I would love to adapt this"?
I'm trying to think. I did a lot of reading over the strike. I think for me, reading is such a fun escape that,
Mhm.
like, I just turn off the adaptation part of my brain. So I don't, because I have to read a lot for work. Like, people send me books and I have to read them. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know if there's something that I was like, oh, I'm dying to adapt this. The stuff that I want to adapt isn't necessarily the stuff I even get hired for. Like, it's like, you know, a novel about World War II. It's some, historical drama.
Mhm.
They aren't necessarily, I'm not as big into rom-coms or chick lit. Um, that doesn't really, I mean, I've written some, but that's not really the sort of genre I love to work in.
Yeah.
I tend to get sent those things. Um, no, and I think, to be honest, some of my favorite books that I read for pleasure are not adaptable. They tend to be different, and, they kind of go deeper and more internal.
Yeah. So when you are writing, what's like the space that you create for yourself? Because I imagine too, like Look, like actors, I feel like you can go to class and you can, put things up with your friends or do self tapes, and there's so many different ways for us to stay active, but I imagine like, do you just set a time for yourself? Like, you know what? From this time to this time, I'm going to write. Or
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think discipline is really hard, and
mhm,
it's definitely an acquired skill, to be honest,
yeah.
for writers. The good news about being a writer is you don't need permission to write. You don't
Yeah.
have to get cast in something. You don't need a camera crew. You don't need even your friends. You can just sit in front of your computer and write as much as you want. I've been really fortunate that really most of the writing I do is always on hire. So there's like a sense of like duty, obligation, and just complete fear and panic
Mhm.
about having to do the actual job that
Yeah.
creates that sort of creates the space in which I have to work. I mean, I'm not really writing so much on spec,
Mhm.
right? So it's like I have a job to do and then I do it. And I think real professional writers, certainly at my level, we treat this as a job. I mean, obviously we have to bring passion to it, but we treat this like people, take their lunch pail and go to the construction site. We take
Yeah.
our lunch pail and we come to the computer, and I'm like, all right, I'm working from 10 to 4 today, and I'm going to get this amount of pages done, or I'm going to get this piece of
Mhm.
work done. And there's like a real sense of like, this isn't a hobby. This is an occupation and a responsibility.
Right.
And I think I'm lucky that I've had so many jobs that it sort of taught me
Mhm.
that I have to treat it that way, that it's not just like, oh, I do it when I feel like it.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, none of us ever feel like it with writers.
Really?
No. Ask any writer if like their favorite part of writing is writing. I would hesitate. Obviously, when you're in the zone and you're really doing well, it does feel good, but it's
Yeah.
not the most pleasant experience, I have to say.
Yeah.
Having written is a great experience and feeling.
What do
About
you
to write is the worst feeling. I always say
Yeah.
there's a sweet spot in the business between when you sell a pitch and you have to start writing it. There's like in between those two moments when you're like, let's say your agent is negotiating the deal or you're waiting to start. That is the dream spot because you don't have to write yet, but you've already sold it. It's like
Yeah.
heaven.
See, that makes me so like not happy because I don't feel happy that you go through it, but
Yeah.
I'm like, we think that we should enjoy everything all the time.
Yeah.
And be, oh, you're just so grateful all the
Yeah.
time. And it's like, you know what? No, those are real emotions to have. Like work is work no matter how you spin it. And like, yes, if you make a living doing what you love, that's amazing. But we all go through that part of like, even when I get an audition, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I have so much to memorize and it's due tomorrow. And now I have to do my makeup again. And then I have to go, no, Brittany, there are so many other people who would love to have this opportunity. Like,
Yeah.
it's a whole mental game. And
Yeah.
like,
And yeah. And I think also, like, I try to teach this to my kids, like, there is a sense of satisfaction in having done something difficult that you
mhm.
don't get. If everything was easy, we would never have a sense of satisfaction having
Yep.
done it. And
Yep.
I think part of the pleasure of writing, for me at least, is having done it feels so good. So yes,
Yeah.
it's a joke, like it sucks doing it, but then I feel good that I've done it. But it's like cleaning your closet. Like it's not fun cleaning your closet, but afterwards you're like, oh my God, look at this gorgeous closet. It feels so good to have overcome.
Mhm. What would you say helps you get in the zone as a writer?
Honestly, coffee and panic.
That's amazing. Coffee and panic.
Bills. Yeah, bills piling up.
Coffee
And
and
it's also a
panic.
little bit of an escape, right? Because I sort of can shut out the outside world and just go inside my head and create a story.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
for sure, coffee and panic.
That should be a band name.
Yeah.
Coffee and
Yeah.
panic.
It's going to be on my tombstone. Coffee, Kayla Alpert, coffee and panic.
That is so funny. Now, when it comes to writing, I mean, say for Wednesday, how much of your voice would you say is in her?
Well, I mean, look, it's a collaborative process and
Mhm.
the creators do a lot of the work and I did a lot of work. I mean, I think it was I mean, I feel that I don't want to say, yes, I wrote the whole thing because that wouldn't be the case.
Right.
But I feel very represented in her character, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
am far from the only person who has worked on the show, but I
Yeah.
definitely feel very represented. There's lots of my ideas and lots of my sensibility and jokes and story twists and turns in there. as there are many contributions from the creators and from Jenna herself and from Tim Burton and from the other directors. I mean, it is a collaborative part of it, but I also do feel a wonderful sense as a part co-owner of her character. Does that make sense? I want to be
Absolutely.
generous in
absolutely
acknowledging that it is a multi-layered process with many voices in it, but I feel like all of us worked hard together to make it what it is.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's the thing, when you're, making any art, it is a very collaborative experience, and it can be very, very rewarding to see, the reflections of these characters, be like, oh, that's a little part of me, and that's a little part of him, and that's a little part of,
No, that was my joke, or that was my idea.
Yeah.
When it's not all mine, but there are pieces that are collaborations, and there are pieces that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that thing I pitched made it in, or you know what I mean? Or Jenna took this thing that I wrote and she made it her own and made it so big, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And that's got to be very rewarding to see someone bring life to what you imagined, and you're like, oh yes, they nailed it, or like even better,
Yeah.
So
the dance is the perfect version of that, because I had said from the beginning, we got to have Wednesday have her own dance. I said, we need our Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction moment. And like, we ended up, I wrote the dance episode, and I wrote basically like, Wednesday comes in, everyone circles her. She does her own dance. She doesn't care what I'm paraphrasing. She doesn't care what anyone thinks, but she's sort of doing her own thing on the dance floor. And Jenna took that and ran with it and created just an unbelievable, and that is not me, that is her. Like, she made it a viral sensation.
I mean, yeah.
From a kernel of an idea,
It's crazy, because as like much as TikTok has like kind of made things just like diluted and watered down, it's also brought life like to so many. Wednesday got on my radar because of TikTok, and that dance was literally everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, they told us at TikTok, something like in the first couple weeks when the show dropped and people were doing the dance and the hashtag, got 28 billion views, billion with a B.
Insane. Now, how would you say that you maintain your mental health in this industry as a writer?
Oh, well, I don't know how to maintain it.
Going off of Coffee and Panic, what helps you center yourself, and what helps
perspective?
Yes.
I mean, look, I'm a mom. I have two 16-year-old boys. Like,
what? I mean, are you Benjamin Button?
I am. We're meeting in the middle. And I think most writers I know live I don't mean this in a bad way, but we live very ordinary lives. I'm not like traveling on yachts and like swanning around in a gown,
Right.
This morning I was walking my dogs and picking up dog poop, just like a normal person, and cleaning the dishes. And, everyday life really intrudes upon any sense of grandiosity. I mean, I think in a weird way, as writers, in a bad way, I feel like we don't have ownership over our success. Like, my day-to-day is so mundane that it's hard to believe that I'm an executive producer of one of the biggest shows in the world. Right. Like, if anything, I think it leans much too much that I don't have a fancy enough life.
Yeah.
No, I like a little bit more glamour. I mean, I got to go to the Golden Globes, and I'm going to go to the Emmys because we got nominated, and that'll be fun. I get to dress up a little and not just wear my leggings and New Balance sneakers and carrying bags of dog shit around the neighborhood. That'll be fun.
Yeah. And look, I mean, as an actor, and a lot of my friends too, you can go from being, on top of the world to being right back to working your job and sweeping.
Yeah, that's right. And working at the salon or whatever it is. I mean, here's a great one. I was at the Golden Globes, and I'm sitting literally at the table with Jenna Ortega and Tim Burton and the two creators and Tasha Leone. And, we're on camera all the time because I'm sitting right behind Jenna. So whenever it goes on her, you literally see me. And you know what I mean? Like at the Golden Globes. And people are texting me. I get a text in the middle of the Golden Globes. Mom, what's for dinner?
No, stop it.
I was like, dude, ask your father, my husband, who's at home with the kids, because you don't get a +1 for the Golden Globes.
Yeah.
I was like, seriously, even at the Golden Globes, like, I'm literally on television in like an archival Lanvin dress and like YSL shoe, like in full
Yeah.
makeup hair. And I'm getting texts about like, what are we having for dinner? Which, by the way, I did not prepare that night.
That's so funny. You're like,
Yeah.
order a pizza, dude.
Yeah. No, literally I said, make a pizza, like make a DiGiorno.
That is so
And
funny.
DiGiorno, if you're listening, you're welcome to, send a little product my way.
But you're right. It is perspective, and also realizing that, like, just because somebody's on TV or successful or this or that, like, doesn't mean that they don't have human problems and that they're not also going through something, or that they don't also just have to like take out the trash themselves. Like, I think, and definitely before I moved out to LA, I would watch TV and be like, oh my God, these people have the perfect lives. Everything's
Right.
amazing. And then, I've had people come on the podcast who have been acting for forever in the industry for a very long time. And they tell me these stories and I'm like, oh my God, like I thought your whole life was made in the shade and all figured out because you booked this one show.
Right. That's right. And by the way, there are definitely A-list people who like go on private jets and yachts and all that
Right.
stuff. And like, I doubt J-Lo is walking her dogs around the neighborhood with bags of dog shit, but that's like an exception to the rule.
I pray to God tomorrow morning I wake up and see a picture of JLo holding a bag of dog shit.
Yeah, me too. J-Lo, if you're listening,
just be like, stars, they're just like us.
they're just like us.
Oh my gosh, Kayla. Well, before you go, I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
What is the best piece of advice you've gotten or that you would give for somebody who wants to break into the industry of being a writer, especially during this time of this historic moment of getting this deal? And like, I think it might have scared a lot of people off to want to get into the industry because it's so uncertain. But what would you say to somebody, or what did somebody tell you that really helped you during your career?
I think the hardest part, I think this is true for actors almost as more than writers, but I would say the hardest part of the work is not working.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to be resilient and develop a thick skin. I think as a writer, you really have to keep writing. You have to listen to people's notes. You don't have to take everyone's notes, but you really have to be able to go with the flow, rewrite. As an actor, you have to be willing to like audition and not get the part, because that's what happens more often than not. You have to pick yourself back up. And whether you don't get a part or don't sell a script or someone don't get a job that you want, that may not be your fault, but it is up to you 100% to pick yourself up off the floor, dust yourself off, and start over again. Mm-hmm. And so I think taking responsibility for your own resilience is really important. Even if everything is conspired against you, it is still up to you to make things right, to keep going.
That is beautifully said.
Thank you.
Do you remember a time where you got like really heartbroken by losing out on something?
So I did a pilot for ABC a couple of years ago called False Prophets, and it was like the first pilot picked up, and it was going to be the next Desperate Housewives, and we had an incredible cast and a great script, and everybody loved it. And through a series of problems, and our director fell out because his mother had died the day before we were supposed to film, and they're just all, I mean, an incredible cast. Everybody loved each other, and it didn't go, and they dragged it out for like 2 years. It was really a nightmare and incredibly sad. It's still one of those projects where I just go, it should have gone. And people still say to me like, oh my God, why didn't that go? Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a crying in the shower kind of for me. And my executive on it and we're still close. She says she still cries about it. No. And that was, I was in my late 40s at that point and a very seasoned television writer, and I'm still upset about it. It's not like you stop having feelings, you just learn to like get yourself, pick yourself back up and brush yourself off and keep going. It doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt. Right. It's like you have to keep going despite that. Right. Oh, absolutely. There's been some heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah. So what happened to that show? It's just, you can't.
Nothing. It died. It's like, that was it. ABC didn't pick it up, and they picked up a bunch of stuff. They didn't pick up female stuff that year. I think being a woman writing female stuff is a disadvantage. They want men to write female stuff.
Oh God. I mean, look at Barbie. A woman wrote it, and that was like the most seen I had ever felt as a woman.
Yeah. And by the way, Robbie Brenner, is the producer, is a friend of mine. Robbie's a woman. One of the most female supportive, kick-ass, amazing producers and
Mhm.
friend. She's just the best. And if not for Robbie, she would have never gotten Greta Gerwig. And they fought for their vision so
Yeah.
hard. And that was a great lesson, because I think had Greta not had such an incredible vision, and Robbie not been such a great in supporter and activator of Greta, that
Mhm.
movie never would have become what it became, and then been such a success. I just hope Hollywood takes away the real lesson of that movie, which isn't, let's make more movies about toys.
Right.
And it's more about, like, let's make more movies that have an authentic point of view
Right.
that we
Right.
don't always get to hear from.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm not like, I had Barbies growing up. I loved Barbie, of course. But that's not why I loved the movie. I loved the movie because it represented what my friends and my mother and my coworkers and my grandmother, what we have all experienced and
Yeah.
like have felt in this world.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're not saying that we hate men. We're just saying that we want to be treated equally.
That's right. And I felt like Greta managed to have that movie say what we all were feeling without it feeling preachy. I
Mm-hmm.
thought, frankly, the Ken story was terrific,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that it spoke to men too. And
Yeah.
it spoke some truth to power in a way that
Yeah.
was also very delightful and surprising, at least to me,
Yeah.
and
I
maybe a
loved
billion
it.
other people. Yeah,
I
I loved
loved
it
it.
too.
It was so good.
So I just hope that as I said, that the message coming out of it, or the lesson coming out of it for movie executives, is not just put more toys on screen.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely like, you know, women are taking back the world, it seems like, because it's like with Barbie and Taylor Swift and just
Yes, this
it's
is an inflection point.
yeah, and I think women just we're all happier now, and that scares some people.
Yeah, we're more empowered. I think the empowerment is really important.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not, again, it doesn't take away from other people's power that we have a voice.
Exactly. Exactly. And, I was thinking about it right before you and I got on here, like talk about empowerment. Like you were literally like, I was with my friend Molly and you were like, you guys are singing right now. We need you to do it. You're like, you're never going to be in front of these people again. You have to sing. And we were like, okay, okay. And then it was just kind of, like I said, it was like we were just hanging out. Like we were literally with you, I think, for like another hour and a half, 2 hours, like just going up and singing songs. And
Great.
I
You
was
guys
like,
sounded so good.
and I literally was like, she is probably the best mom ever. Like, that's what I thought of. Cause you just have this very, like, come under my wing type of vibe and like helpful and supportive. And like just being a woman in this town and meeting another woman like that, it means a lot. Like, I'll
Well,
start
I really
crying.
appreciate that. I'm not sure my teenage sons would agree with you, but
Yeah, I mean,
I'll
it's
take it from
nice.
someone.
Yeah, it's nice to meet another woman in this industry that you don't feel, like that there's no cattiness or no competition. It's just like we're
Yeah.
all in this together as a collaborative
Look,
experience.
I'm not
And
going to say that my singing voice is better than yours. By the way, for those of you listening, I have a terrible singing voice, and Brittany and her friend have great singing voices.
oh my
But
gosh.
holy moly.
It was so
But it
fun.
was fun. It was, Jeff Rake and Bill Chase, who started the Picket Line Karaoke.
Hmm.
Jeff Rake created Manifest, and Bill's
Yes.
a bunch of shows. Like, these are big writers. They really do. They are very menschy guys that started the
Yeah.
whole karaoke thing. And my friend Abby Cohn, who you should have on your podcast, who wrote Never Been Kissed and The
Was
Vow,
it?
and He's Just Not That Into You.
Yes. Yes. We met. She sang
Yes,
with us.
yes, that's
Yes.
right.
Oh
You
my
should have her
gosh.
on the podcast,
I
because
would
she's so amazing.
love
She's
to.
amazing.
Yeah.
We just had a great time doing it. So
Yeah. Well,
I'm
I'm
glad.
glad that in, all of that, it brought us together somehow.
Yes.
Well, Kayla, thank you so much. This was so much fun. And I will be rooting for you at the
Thank you.
Emmys. And a pizza will be in the oven that night so that you don't get any texts from.
Yeah, exactly. I will be texting Domino's from the Emmys.
Yeah, exactly. Like, figure it out yourself, kids. Mama's out.
I'm off duty.
And pick up the dog shit yourself, too.
Yeah, while you're at it.
Okay. I adore you. Thank you so much for this.
Brittany.
All right.
Thank
have
you.
a good
You're
one.
very welcome. Bye.
Bye.